The police found a phone under my bed. It wasn't mine. There was one recording on it. A voice whispered, "Close your eyes." This happened when I was 17, during the first summer my parents trusted me to stay home alone overnight. We lived in an old 2-story house on a quiet street near the edge of town. It wasn't isolated exactly, but it had that feeling, the kind of place where the street lights were too far apart, the gardens were too dark, and every sound after midnight seemed louder than it should have been. My parents had gone away for the weekend to visit family, and I remember being excited at first. I ordered food, watched films downstairs, and stayed up much later than I normally do. But about 11:30 I went to bed. I know the exact time because I remember looking at my alarm clock. 11:47 p.m. I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like the kind of silence that makes you start listening for things you wouldn't normally hear. At first, it was just the normal noises around old houses, like pipes ticking, wood settling, a faint tapping from the window when the wind moved the trees outside. Then I heard floorboards creak. It came from the landing outside my bedroom, not a random pop or crack, a proper footstep. Slow, heavy. I sat up in bed and stared at the door. There was another creak, and then another. Closer. I told myself it was the house. I actually whispered it out loud. It's just a house. But then the footsteps stopped directly outside my room. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. My bedroom door was closed. I always slept with it closed because the landing was pitch black at night and I hated seeing the darkness through the gap. For maybe 10 seconds more, nothing happened. Then the handle moved, slowly. It turned down with one soft click. Not all the way at first, just a little. Then further, then all the way. I was frozen. The door didn't open, the handle just stayed down. Then after a few seconds, it slowly lifted back up. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. I know that sounds ridiculous, but when you're scared and alone, your brain tries to save you by making excuses. Maybe the handle was loose. Maybe a draft moved it. Maybe I was half asleep. I stayed sitting up for a while, staring at the door, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. Eventually, I lay back down, still facing the door with my phone in my hand. I must have been lying there for 20 minutes when I heard something else. Scratch, scratch, scratch. This time it didn't come from the landing. It came from inside my room, near the bottom of my bed. It was quiet at first, like fabric brushing against wood. Then it got slower, more deliberate. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I turned my phone screen, but didn't switch the torch on yet. I don't know why. I think part of me was scared. What if I lit up the room? I'd actually see someone there. The scratching stopped. I held my breath. Then the phone vibrated. Just once. I nearly dropped it. There was no notification on the screen, no message, no call. Just a home screen and my own reflection in the black glass at the top. Then I heard a whisper. It came from right beside my bed. "Close your eyes." I can still hear it now. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It sounded like someone speaking with their mouth almost touching the mattress. I threw the covers off, switched my phone torch, and shone it around the room. Nothing. No one by the door. No one near the bed. No one in the corner. My wardrobe was shut. My curtains were closed. My window was locked. I told myself I must have fallen asleep and dreamt it. Then a whisper came again, this time from under the bed. "Close your eyes." I screamed and jumped backwards, so fast I hit the wall. For a few seconds I stood there with my phone light shaking in my hand, pointing it at the floor. I didn't want to look under the bed. I knew I had to. I lowered the light slowly. There was nothing there. No person, no hand, no face. Just the storage boxes I kept under there, an old pair of trainers and some dust. But one thing was different. One of the boxes had been pulled out slightly. I didn't touch it. I backed out of the room and locked myself in the bathroom. From there I called my dad. He answered half asleep and annoyed at first, until he heard my voice. Then he told me to stay there. Stay where I was and call the police if I thought someone was in the house. I told him I didn't know what I thought. That was the truth. While I was on the phone, I heard another sound from my bedroom. Not a scratch this time, a ringtone. A quiet, muffled ringtone. It wasn't mine. My phone was in my hand. My dad heard it too. He went silent and then said, "Get out of the house now." I climbed out of the bathroom window onto the flat roof above the kitchen extension and shouted for my neighbour. She heard me almost straight away. I must have sounded completely insane because within a minute she was outside in her dressing gown, phone in hand, calling the police while telling me not to move. By the time the police arrived, my dad was already on his way home. They searched the house first. Nothing. No one in my room. No one in the wardrobes. No one under the bed. No one hiding downstairs. At first, I could tell they thought I'd panicked over a nightmare. Then one of the officers stopped on the landing and looked up. The loft's hatch wasn't shut properly. It was only open by an inch. I knew that latch. It was stiff. My dad used to use a pole to open it because it never moved easily. One of the officers pulled it down and went up with a torch. For a while, all I could hear was the creak of the ladder and his boots moving across the boards above my head. Then he shouted down for another officer. That was when I knew they'd found something. But it wasn't a person. And it wasn't someone living up there. What they found was worse in a different way. The insulation above my bedroom had been moved aside. One of the boards had been loosened, leaving a gap, narrow enough, directly looking down into my room. Not a big hole, just enough for someone to see movement. Enough to know whether my light was on or whether I was in bed. Beside the gap, taped to one of the beams, was a small Bluetooth speaker. The kind you can buy anywhere. Black, cheap, battery powered. That was where the whisper had come from. Not from beside my bed, not from under it, but from above me. The police checked the loft properly. At the far end, behind an old water tanker, they found that one of the dividing panels between our house and the empty house next door had been unscrewed and pushed loose. The house next door had been under renovation for months. Builders came and went during the day. Sometimes the front door was left open. Sometimes the back gate wasn't locked. Nobody thought anything because it was just an empty house being worked on. Whoever had been inside our loft hadn't needed to break into our front door. They had come through from the next door. Across the shared roof space, they waited above my room. The police searched the empty house too, but whoever had been there had already gone. All they found was dust disturbed by the loft boards, one fresh trainer print near the dividing panel, and a screwdriver left on the floor below. My dad asked the officer if it could have been one of the builders. The officer said maybe. Then he said it could also have been anyone who knew the house was empty. That didn't make me feel better. Later, my dad went through my room with me, and we found one more thing. It was under my bed, pushed right against the wall. A small black thorn. Not mine. The screen was cracked, the battery was nearly dead, and it hadn't been there earlier. I know it hadn't, because I'd shone my torch under the bed myself. There was no SIM card on it. No contacts, no photos, just one audio file. My dad told me not to play it, but I already had before he could stop me. It was only 3 seconds long, a whisper. The same voice I'd heard in the dark. Close your eyes. That was bad enough. But what really stayed with me was the file name. It wasn't called Recording 1. It wasn't called Audio. It was called Second Try. I don't live in that house anymore. My parents sold it for the following year, and I've never been able to sleep comfortably in a house or room with a loft hatch nearby. Because the worst part wasn't finding out someone had been above me. It was realizing they had planned the whole thing. The footsteps, the handle, the scratching, the voice. All of it was meant to make me believe something impossible was in the room with me. And sometimes I wonder what the first try was, or who it was meant for.